Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. What we're going to be looking at today is the 4 steps for better catty. We're going to be introducing you to how this is working, how you can get the most out of your catty survey, and how you can optimize your call center. The webinar is going to be about 40 minutes long, and at the end of that, we'll have a brief Q&A session, so you can write some answers in your live chat that's embedded into the YouTube video. So what we're going to be looking at actually is sort of several steps and looking at how you can go through different steps within your call center to make the optimization the most effective you can. Obviously, we'll be looking at some of the automated processes you can do there, how you can improve the quality, how you can sort of look at reporting and reacting and making the changes as you're going through any particular project or survey you have running, and overall increasing your efficiency, which will lead you to lower costs and optimized center. And the basis behind this is about thinking agile, being able to react on what you're seeing happening, being able to make the changes to optimize your own work processes and field work. So when we talk about agile, what we're really looking at is how you run your business processes, how you go through the stages of your field work, creating your questionnaires, you're designing, taking in your sample, managing it, collecting the data, all the processes you go through, but doing it in a smaller step so that every time you're starting to collect some data, you're seeing the impact that has had on your sample. You're seeing how changes can be made to your questionnaire to optimize the workflow to reach the targets you're supposed to be making, manipulating the way that your data is interpreted, the amount of call attempts you're taking, making sure that everything is optimized within there and making those fine-tuning adjustments on the feedback you're getting in real time. So it's a continuous process throughout the steps and the stages that you're doing in your field work. It's not my one-time shot like a retrospective. It's a continuous mindset of adjusting, monitoring, and making those improvements. Now, we're going to be touching on several different areas within Nebu, and we're going to be looking at the sort of different software suites we have, and the focus sort of today is on the data collection, obviously, the reporting aspect that taps into that, the dialer, host dialer for obviously making your calls from your call center, and we'll be touching on the Nebu data hub, the way that the back-end databases can be cleaned, manipulated, and how you can get the most out of the sample that you're being provided, the data you're collecting through. So first of all, we have to look at the first step, automating your processes. We're going to be, when we're looking at this sort of automating the processes, we're going to be looking at obviously, how you get your sample loaded into the system in the right formats, how you can make those calls with your agents, make that dialing the most efficient and optimal, and how you can get that feedback on what exactly is happening to that sample, to the calls you're making, so you can make those adjustments. You can be agile in your mindset. So the first thing we want to look at, obviously, is your sample import. The optimum way, the most automated way of getting this happening is having your sample imported directly into your workflow. And you can look at that by sort of scheduling your loading of your data, taking a data file in a format. So if you're using the same sample provider, you know the layout of the file they're going to give you. You can set up sort of automated processes to take that file, monitor an FTP site, pull it down into your system, do the mapping, and then automatically import that at a scheduled basis into your sample. So using tools such as the AIS tool, the auto import service tool in Dub Interviewer, the ETL tools that are available for processing and loading into the hub, and the sort of hub itself, which automatically connects to different data sources and can sort of push those into different projects at different times on there. And the way you automate that, then you can obviously save a lot of your time, a lot of the manual processes in getting that maybe perhaps daily delivery of sample files. And that whole process then becomes much more effective. But even if you're sort of saving time on loading them, other sort of built-in features there that you can look at is to make sure that you get standardization on your phone numbers, especially important if you're dialing internationally and you want then to sort of use that standardization on there. You can use that to then assign automatically the time zones. So samples only released at the time you're going to be calling when it's needed to be released, so that you're not making calls to respondents in the middle of their night. You've got that sort of set up automatically to release those numbers during your working day, but also the respondent's correct time period. And having that sort of cleaning, the more you use the hub on the back end there, the more cleaning you can do. You can set up different processes to transfer the different the data you're receiving, to make adjustments to it, but also adding on some enhancements in there as well. Then when it comes to dialing, obviously using a dialer has benefits in there as well. Not only does it help to make that call, so you're saving time in dialing numbers, registering those call attempts that result in an answer machine or busy tones, and it sort of saving all of that time there. What you're also doing is decreasing that interviewer fatigue. Your interviewers are getting sort of responses, they're getting to speak to live people, they're not having to sort of work through perhaps bad sample, and getting continuously dead lines or no answers or errors in the sampling there. So all of that can help your interviewer to stay motivated, to stay focused on the job, and to improve their productivity. And then obviously, to understand exactly what's happening here, you need that real-time reporting. You need to be able to see exactly what is happening in the call center, finding out what's happening with your sample, tracking the progress of your field work on there, and sharing the results amongst various different groups. It may not just be the supervisor that's running the call center that needs that information. It could also be your research exec, who is the go-between, the liaison with the client and the fieldwork agency as well. So there's different people who are going to want to look at those different reports, and you need a simple, clear way of reporting them. Now, if we do look at sort of an auto import service here, this is just an example of something there. What you can do is obviously set up a schedule there, how often it's going to execute that, how many times it's going to check for new files, the location, login details of where that's going to be, if it's on an FTP site or a secure FTP site, putting in the sort of the string variables for the naming convention of what file you're going to pull down and what type it is, and then which project you're going to load it in, obviously using different sort of presets on there as well. And as we can see sort of from here, the settings are just as important there to set up all of that information, so you know that you're going to get it from a particular area. And using the preset, you can obviously have different definitions of where you're going to access that FTP site, what the passwords are, what the mapping is for the different projects. So it means that you can set up multiple areas, multiple presets for the different suppliers you have. And again, that helps in that automated process. You know what mapping you're going to get from a certain download. You know that that's going to be in a specified format, and you'll be able to import that directly into your sample. The other thing, obviously, is when we were looking and we specified about cleaning, doing some of the formatting of your sample, the options you have upon import enables you to normalize those phone numbers, to get rid of some of the sort of digits on there, the brackets that sometimes come into different areas of your phone number that you want to get out there, which means that your dialer or any sort of click plugin you may have for dialing is going to be much more effective. It's not going to try and sort of dial an extra character that's in the system there. Having the default for your country code and having the auto match time zone there means that obviously it's setting when the sort of the period for interviewing is in relative times for your respondent. And assigning a time group means that you're always calling at the best available time. You're calling at the most appropriate time for that particular sample. And it also means you're not then burning that sample by calling it in a time period where you're going to get those not available, no answer type of calls. So obviously we said you want to be able to report on this. You want to be able to keep track of all of your processes. So what we do here is we report. You've got the capability within Nebu Reporter to build up different widgets to add in different information for you, so you can see what's happening on. You can track the progress in the different areas, and you can format that information to show in different respects. So you can see what's happening on your sample. How many new numbers do I have? And it's a very clean and easy way to look at what's happening, how your fieldwork's progressing, whether you need to start purchasing new sample, whether you need to start looking at changing information that you're receiving on the amount of dials you're making, the amount of bad numbers coming in there. And this enables you to then go back to your sample provider and discuss with them why you're getting certain levels on there. If there's a lot of wrong numbers in there, a lot of errors on there, a lot of the sort of dead lines that don't come up, it gives you that capability to really go into detail with your sample provider and make the most out of what you're getting. Now, the second stage, obviously, we want to look at is how you improve or maintain that quality, making sure that whilst you're doing the optimization, you're not losing out on the quality aspect of your fieldwork. You're maintaining the standards that you've set and your clients are relying on, and making sure that the automation, the non-manual overview is optimized, is making sure that it's working. So the areas we're going to look at when we're looking at sort of improving your quality is obviously looking after your agents, monitoring them, making sure they're working in the most professional manner there, keeping your appointments, making sure that when your respondent is asked to be called at a certain time, you respect that timing. You don't lose those interviews that you've worked so hard to actually speak to someone and make sure you're going to get that interview completed in there. You want to do this at the minimum call attempts. You don't want to be burning all your sample. You don't want to be sort of spending time dialing numbers that aren't going to result in talk time, aren't going to result in completes. And of course, keeping within those regulatory standards, making sure you're meeting the requirements, wherever your legislation may be, meeting the standards, the best practice for the industry, making sure that you're fully compliant there. So when we talk about monitoring agents, what we're really looking at is providing ways that they can test surveys. So they can run through in a test mode, they can make comments on the survey, give that feedback on how that survey is working for them, allowing the supervisors to send messages that may be encouraging certain individual interviewers, give them some motivation on there as well, sending messages about how they're conducting that survey so they have feedback on their performance in real time. They have messages coming up on their screen that will tell them, perhaps they need to probe more deeply at a certain question. Congratulating them on a good job if you're monitoring, if you're listening in. So you've got that ability to sort of make notes on there, record their performance, provide that feedback, and that will then improve your agent and sales, improve the way they're working. And built within Nebu systems, obviously, the ability to monitor someone's screen, share it with them, see what's happening, so you can then work on how you can actually get the best out of your interviewers, how you can make sure that they are really working on optimizing your call center, maintaining that quality, working to the best of their ability. Keeping appointments is obviously important for your respondent. You know, if you've managed to speak to someone in the first instance, you've got that engagement level. What you really want to try and do is make sure that obviously that goes back to the initial agent that spoke to them. So you can build up that rapport, maintain that consistency, and make sure you're getting it. But if your agent's not going to be there, then you don't want to miss that call. And being able to release that appointment back to the pool so the next available agent picks it up means that the respondent may not necessarily know who called them first of all, remember that, but they will know they were called, and they will know that that was an appointment that was made. They had the time on there. So respecting those appointments means that you don't waste, again, time that your agent could be used beneficially in making completes. You need the minimal call attempts. You don't want to be sort of making, placing 7th, 8th try if nothing's happening after the 2nd or 3rd attempt. If the bulk of your completes are coming into the first couple of attempts, then there's no point in extending that out further. There's no point in redialing sample that's not going to get into a complete, into an end result that you want. So it's important to have disposition reporting to be able to see how many attempts, what results you're getting on which call attempt, so you know how to adjust that, how to look at what's happening, and being able to break that down by the quota group you may be working in, perhaps some of the different time zones in there, to see if there's different impacts and be able to adjust on that. And what you want to do is obviously minimize your sort of call attempts, but maximize the time, the talk time your agent is having. So reducing that waiting time, cleaning the sample, making sure it's good quality sample, making sure your dialer is working correctly, so you're getting the most out of the agent. And obviously having your regulated standards, being able to have the maximum attempts in there, not going over the tries that are specified for your particular country or industry area. Make sure your dropouts don't exceed a certain amount. So, having a dialer that has the capacity in there to adjust itself, to be able to downgrade itself if it's getting too many drops per hour, or too many of those silent calls in there. So having those automated processes means that your quality will be maintained. So if we just a quick screen grab here of the interviewer sharing. So obviously you can see the different interviewers that are available to start watching. Any that haven't done that screen sharing for them, you can send them a quick message on there. And the screen sharing in the Dub Interviewer system, Nebu system, is just a plug into the browser. So it makes it a lot easier to be able to sort of follow exactly what is happening on your home workers, where they are. You pick up and you can see a video of their screens, and also sort of follow what's happening there. Then send them the messages, do the recordings, the reportings of them. Being able to set the different rules for recycling those numbers. There's different options in your supervisory screens to be able to change how many minutes you wait between them, to be able to change the appointment time slots that are available when someone asks to be called, and also setting up your different dial levels on there. So even if you want to set your project at a maximum dial level, you want your project in predictive mode, you can specify certain workstations to work below that mode. So perhaps you have a quota set for high level CEOs. You don't want that sample burnt too much. You don't want the sort of the interviewer that's working on those areas to be continuous in their talk time. Perhaps you want them to have more of that break in there because they're doing a longer survey. It's a more intense survey. So you want them working on workstations that are set to perhaps an auto dial mode or a click to dial mode, whereas others maybe in the same project are working at just quick turnover. There's a lot more sample in there, so they're dialing at a different rate, and it's easy to do that within the settings, the project settings and the workstation settings. And obviously, as we discussed about sort of appointment setting on there as well, the ability to be able to automatically release your appointments, to reassign them back to the pool, to be able to make sure that that appointment timing is respected, then you have that ability per project to set that. Obviously, core dispositions, how many attempts you're making, having the feedback on how good that information is, how good your sample is, how it's working in the different quota groups is important then to know how many call attempts you should be making, how many sort of new numbers you've got in the system there, and following the reporting that's going on so you can adapt and adjust your own call center, the max tries you're making. So you know that you're not going to be calling numbers that aren't going to be available. You're only going to work through on the maximum attempts to make the best out of the sample you've got. But obviously you need to be able to report on this, you need to be able to react. And as we talked about in the first sort of setup, the first slides, is being that agile mindset. And you can only do that really if you're getting that feedback, if you're able to see exactly what's happening in your fieldwork process, getting the feedback there so you can then make those adjustments, gain those efficiencies. And what you need to do is obviously reviewing your project progress, looking at the core results of what you've done on your monitoring, coaching your interviewers, and the blacklisting adherence. Again, part of quality, but also part of that ability to just really make the best, report on it, see what's happening, see how that sample's coming through. So when you're looking at your project, reviewing those, what you need to be looking at is your response rates. How many sort of calls am I getting? How many calls per hour is my agent placing? How much sort of completes? How many completes am I getting on the percentage of numbers I'm dialing? I need to know what's going on in there to see whether there's any issues. Monitoring the last question in the survey can also show any difficulties there may come up, showing that if you've got a single question where a lot of people drop out and then perhaps they refuse, or it's no longer sort of being completed on there may be an issue with the survey. You may be able to then adjust that survey, check the consistency in there, perhaps check the routing, see what's happening. Being able to review the length of interview, the LOI on your survey. It's obviously important for your costing purposes. If you're sort of your agency has asked you to conduct this field work, they've told you it's only a 5-minute survey, and your LOI is averaging out at 15 minutes. Then obviously there's something there that you need to be able to have that information to hand to be able to go back to the commissioning company and say to them, there's difference here, and we need to adjust the costings. We need to look at the sort of review here as well. But it also helps you identify perhaps there's certain agents that are spending too long on a survey or not long enough. So having that length of interview information is important for, again, controlling not only the cost but the quality of your interviewers. And monitoring talk time becomes important, because then obviously comparing your talk time with the actual time that is being spent on the survey means you get that indication of how optimized your calling is, your sample is. The lower the talk time you're getting per hour as compared to the interviewing time or the login time for your agents, it means they're spending more time in dialing numbers that don't exist, recording those numbers and the outcomes, trying to work through sort of bad sample, or spending too much time perhaps between those samples because they've been demotivated. They're not sort of engaged in the actual survey process. They're not finding those benefits of being able to talk to respondents. If you're monitoring your core results, looking at outcomes on there, your quota groups, and your quotas and time zones that are happening there, it means you know when to place your agents, when to sort of conduct your surveys. You can adjust the amount of interviews you have on a project because you can see how much needs to be worked. You get the information there about certain quota groups that are working there, and you can direct interviewers to work in quota groups within there. They can select the quota to work from as they're logging in. So if you're seeing that certain quota groups are perhaps not being fulfilled, perhaps it's a difficult target area and you want to put your best people on there, using that information on the productivity of an interviewer, the agent, their scoring, and the feedback that you've got from monitoring them, you can put those on certain quota groups and direct your interviewers to the best place. So again, you're optimizing the workflow. You're putting the most appropriate agents into the most appropriate quotas for that interviewing purpose. And obviously running a blacklist and having this enabled is, whilst there is a great benefit in having a blacklist, a global blacklist, and applying that to your sample. So you're removing those numbers that have already been asked not to be called. You know they're not going to give you a sort of completion. They're going to be refusals. There may be different types of blacklists you want to be able to apply. You have different projects. They have different sort of characteristics to them. And it may be that by having different blacklists within a global list and applying them to the type of project, you can interview someone that's quite happy, a respondent happy to take a survey on a particular brand or a particular area, but aren't happy on other aspects of that. So you can build up different blacklists and apply those as well, and make sure that, again, you're getting the best out of that sample use. There's also capabilities, whilst it's not exactly a blacklisting options on there, but the ability to be able to block certain sample, to be able to set up certain conditions in there and stop that sample from being released to your agents, it is very crucial in maintaining that quality, maintaining the standards, getting the feedback on how many of those sample areas are blocked. And blocking conditions can be really quite useful, that if you've loaded up a particular sample wave in there as well, and each sample load is given a new sort of wave number increase on there, you can very quickly block that sample if you've seen an error in there, or if it's proving to be a low response rate on that sample. Perhaps it's not as good as you thought it would be. You might be choosing or using a new sample provider for that and testing out that. And rather than being able to have to go through each individual record and change the status on it or set it up there, blocking on a sample wave means that you can move on to perhaps better sample that's been imported, move on to newer sample that's been imported, and again, keep your interviewers motivated and engaged in the process. And so coaching your interviewers really helps on that, being able to have that feedback on them, listening in, so that when you're watching their screen, you're also hearing the audio. And again, depending on the regulations in different countries, you can listen in, you can sort of coach them during those interviews, but this needs to be checked, appropriate to the area you're in, the local sort of conditions on there. But being able to have those messages, as we said, enabling that coaching, that getting the best out of your agents, improving their quality, improving the way they're conducting themselves, and how that reflects upon you as a fieldwork organization. And the productivity reporting in there is very important, so you can see how your interviewers are doing, how many sort of calls they're making per hour, how many completes they're hitting, what their percentage conversion rates are, their strike rates are. Being able to see the scoring for your interviewers will then let you know how well your survey is being conducted, how you're progressing through there. So again, we're going to look at sort of a report on here, jumping into the Nebu reporter, and slightly different layout this time, but we're getting different information that we can see very quickly, very easily. We've got the quotas we can look at for our different groups, and we can again change these in the sort of listing of them, the targets, how it's been done, and these being fed in real-time information. So you're getting that information on your quotas. You can see exactly what's happening on there. You can monitor obviously the talk time, the total time you're getting, and see how that compares. See there's sort of obviously the minimum maximum times that are there. So if you see some interview times that are really beyond what they should be, you can start investigating why that happened, start drilling down into your information. The last questions we said, you can see where responses are dropping out, see if it is a proper screen out question or if there is a difficulty in there. Perhaps your screeners are too tight and you're removing people that you should be trying to interview on there, and you can adjust those if needed. Looking at your appointment details obviously enables you to be able to see, how many appointments you've got coming up, how these are likely to convert, and which areas you've got, which dates those are happening. So if you're getting towards the end of your field work, you can start reducing perhaps the amount of agents that are on there. You've got a lot of appointments. Those fixed continuation appointments that you're happening there will mean that these people have already spoken to you. They're already engaged in the survey and they've asked you to come back. So that the likelihood of those being converted into completes is very high. So you can adjust how you're working. And looking at your interview productivity, looking at how many completes you're getting, the ratio you're getting from your interviewers on the system means you can adjust the amount of interviewers you've got working. You can look at optimizing your call center to work on the maximum amount of surveys, different surveys, and get that field work done, completed as soon as you are able to. So obviously all of these are looking at increasing your efficiency and, maximizing your talk time, minimizing your costs, minimizing those sample areas, making sure that you're working in an optimal fashion, you're automating where necessary, you're getting out of your system sort of any inefficiencies that have impacts on costs. Maximizing talk time, obviously the higher talk time you're getting there, the lower cost per interview. There's a direct correlation between that. If an agent is interviewing and they're talking to someone, they're engaging those people, they are conducting surveys, they're collecting data for you, and the data is the value to you. If they're spending their time recording a no answer, dialing a number, getting a lot of sort of bad sample and errors in there, then they're not making the most, they're not being utilized to their optimal area. The talk time is important for your agents. It's where your biggest cost lies, interviewer costs in the systems. So the more you can increase that talk time, increase the productivity, the lower your costs are going to be. And obviously, minimizing those sample areas means that you're not using the bad sample. You're increasing the calling rates, the calling attempts on there, and you're making sure that you can get that optimal workflow, making sure you've got a most efficient workforce happening in your call center. So looking typically at the sort of talk times, what you're getting within the industry, there's different modes you can use on a dialer, which will give you different amounts of talk time per agent per hour on there as well. So really, it's trying to sort of see how you can make the most out of the sample you've got, the dialing you're taking part in, and increasing that interviewer talk time. Now, and some of the costs I'll sort of go into more detail about it, but obviously, the more you're dialing manually, it takes time, 2 or 3 seconds to dial a number, a couple of seconds more to then hear what that tone is. If it's an answer machine, I need a few more seconds to click on the screen to register that as an answer machine, to click to the next survey and to bring that up and then to start that process again. So you can see that manually dialing on there, that the talk time you are going to get, and obviously these are sort of averages across different industries, different call centers. But what you really want to do is optimize the talk time. So reducing the amount of time spent in dialing numbers, recording bad numbers, moving on. And there you want to optimize that. We're looking at, as we said, sort of 10 euros per hour for a non-dialer, and using an auto dialer, progressive dialer in here, we're looking at around €3.90 per hour on the costs for your talk time. And let's just sort of examine how we got to there. So I'm going to use the 12-minute interview length on here as well, because it relates to the manual 12 minutes per hour on that. So, obviously this is just an illustration, and you'll get different results depending on your call center and how you're working there. But if we assume we're doing 1,000 12-minute interviews, that'll give me my 200 talk time hours. So that talk time I'm using, that 12 minutes per hour talk time, and there are, obviously 1,000 of them gives you 200 hours there. So we've got a total interviewing time So we're only getting 12 minutes per hour interviewing of talk time. Then we've got 1,000 hours in actually being online interviewing there as well. Which means that that's going to give me, if I assume I'm paying my agent 10 euros per hour, and obviously, again, costs will change on that as well. It means that that's going to cost me, 10,000 euros for my 1,000 interviewing hours at 10 euros per hour. Very easy way of sort of working that out. And obviously, there'll be adjustments for different sort of cost levels in different areas, different countries. But as an illustration purpose, you can see that this is how it equates down. Now, comparing that to an auto dialer, and this is in sort of a power dialing, progressive dialing mode, you've got the same 1,000 12-minute interviews. So we're still going to do another 1,000 interviews, and they're going to be an LOI of 12 minutes. But this time, that's still going to be 200 talk time hours. But because I'm getting the sort of 34 minutes per hour talk time, it means that instead of 1,000 hours I'm using for interviewing, I only need 375 interviewing hours this time. I've got a lot less overall interviewing hours. So then when we look at the impact that is on the costs, still having 10 euros per hour for my interviewer, paying my agent there, but I've now got a 0.76 euro talk time hour for the dialer cost, the dialer as a service cost from Nebu. If I put all of those together, I'm looking at a total cost now of sort of 3,902 euros for my 1,000 interviewers and hours. So it's 3.92 per hour. And the difference of that, between 10 euros and 3.90 euros, we're getting down towards, a lot lower, a cheaper saving, which either means you can, for the same cost, do much more interviewing, conduct much more surveys and get those through your call center, or you can, for the sort of, or look at just conducting your fieldwork in a less amount of time. So you're not employing agents for longer when they're not required. You're optimizing that information flow. You're optimizing the way that your interviews are being used, which all leads to having increased efficiencies, reduced costs, optimizing your call center. So obviously what we're looking at is then back in the software, where you're going to make these savings, which parts of the presentation, the optimization relate to the different areas of the software. So for Dub Interviewer, you've got the ability in there to normalize your sample. You've got the productivity reporting back onto your interviewers, your agents. You can view your core results. You've got the ability in there to sort of make sure that your field work and your data collection areas are being optimized and made the most efficient they can do. If you're looking at the dialer as a service, then obviously this is a hosted dialer, so you're reducing the overhead on your actual spend, your cost there as well. You've got the ability to dip in and out of the hosted dialer as and when you require it. It's done on sort of a monthly basis there. You've got the ability to go into the different modes, to set those different modes on the projects as we're talking about. You can have that recording of your surveys for QA purposes and the listening in on there. You can use that then to monitor and coach the agents you've got in field by listening to them and according to regarding the regulations, also being able to talk to them, coach them in real time, speak to them whilst they're surveying and interviewing. And on that all means that you're reducing the core costs. Whilst there's also the talk time benefit that's being increased to reduce the agent costs, using Nebu's dialer as a service means that Nebu itself purchases those calls and can put on bulk buying of calls. So for multiple agencies, we can buy those calls and pass on those reduced costs to our clients, to those that are using our hosted dialer service and using our sort of service providers, our core agents, our calling system to get that discount on their core costs. Obviously, Nebu Reporter as you saw, it's a very clean, very easy way of showing those real-time results. It means that you can easily view the information that's available to you. This can be shared without sort of additional logins on just an open link, or it can be password protected on there. And it means that you can then close that loop, close that whole agile thinking where you're processing through your workflow. You can identify the areas that maybe need addressing, and you can make sure that is actioned upon. You can look at the reports there and get back into what's happening in your field work and make the adjustments. As I said, and then the data hub, this gives you advanced cleaning capabilities in there, processing capabilities. It means that you can take the sample files you have, you can apply different rules on there, you can sort of transfer some of the information in it as well. We can perform calculations on there. You can then enhance that sample by pulling in outside material, pulling in sort of statistics from on social grading, and connecting that to the postal code you may have, or the address you may have for the sample records. So you can pull in extra information and enhance the sampling data you have available to that, and auto push that out to your project. You can also then have that project information come back into the hub and match that up with external sources, pull in comparisons there as well. And because all of the data from your dub interview, your data collection, can sit into the hub, it means you can then start doing cross-project analysis. You can start analyzing the fieldwork you've conducted on topics across multiple surveys, and see whether you've got any consistencies there, see whether there's patterns that are occurring in different types of fieldwork, in different studies you're conducting, to see if those can be adjusted even more, if you can make more benefit from them, identify the areas of fieldwork that you're working on that are more profitable for you, that have those lower costs, the higher incidence rates, the maximum talk times on there. So you're getting that optimal information from your system. So that was the webinar conducted for this morning. I hope that you've sort of got some benefit out of there. It's sparked some ideas of how you can look at adjusting the operations within your fieldwork, within your calling center, and how you can also optimize your own processes and make sure that you are getting the most out of using Nebu, getting the most out of your call center. So if there's any sort of extra questions on there, be happy to have them. Also, bear in mind there are other webinars available on our YouTube channel. You can always look back at this one, share it, and also look at any of the other sort of previous ones as well. We've conducted webinars before on more of the technical aspects of CATI and the efficiencies in there, and other areas of Nebu. So please feel free to view other webinars, view other sort of topics of conversation in there as well. Obviously, comment on here as well if there are any specific questions. Yes, we're always happy to take any questions from people. If you'd like to discuss how Nebu can help you, contact any of the people you may have, or info@nebu.com. Someone will answer your replies there. Making adjustments to this. Yep, you can make those adjustments in real time. There is the capability to be able to sort of reload. If you've made questionnaires changes, you can reload those. You've got the ability to change and apply all of the settings for a project. So if you change the calling times, change the sort of max attempts on those as well, or the appointment times, it'll recalculate back through the system when those are supposed to come up, how your sample is going to be processed on that. And it doesn't mean to say you don't need downtime to make those changes and make those adjustments in there. So you've got that ability to view the reports, react, and action. So, and just the last question typing up there as well. Costs of dial-over as a service. Yeah, obviously, the dial-over as a service is a sort of an ad hoc service we put in there on our system. It's a cloud-based dialer that sort of Nebu hosts and runs, and we've got contracts with telephony providers in there, so a SIP provider, so you can have local gateways into various different countries from the centralized system. But it's done on sort of an ad hoc basis. So if you need to use a sort of predictive mode for a month, you don't need to buy that license for a year on there. You can just simply use it for the 1 month that you need your fieldwork for, and you can dip in and out of the dialer as a service as and when required. So once it's set up for you, it's up to you to choose how often you're using it, how you're getting the benefit out of there. And obviously we know that not every survey you're using will be appropriate for the different dialing modes. This can always be impacted on different ways. But again, we cover this in more detail in some of our sort of white papers that we have on the website and some of the previous webinars that we've been through. So again, thanks everyone for joining the webinar. I look forward to seeing you on the next one, and hope you have a good day. So thanks all for watching.